Okay, final page of the notes here, example 6. These are very typical problems that you'll see on the AP exam, possibly on multiple choice, also possible on free response as well. And so we want to make sure that we know how to do these symbolic type problems. Okay, so using this table and these functions that they give us, we want to find these derivatives. So if h of x is equal to f of x times g of x plus f of x divided by g of x, then find h prime of 5. Well, in order to find h prime of 5, the first thing I need to do is find h prime of x. So if I do this term by term, the first term I'm taking the derivative of is this f of x times g of x. Well, that's a product, and so in order to take the derivative of a product, I have to use the product rule. And so the product rule says the first times the derivative of the second plus the second times the derivative of the first. And so there is my derivative of that product portion of h of x. The second portion of h of x is this quotient. And so in order to take the derivative of that quotient, I have to use, of course, the quotient rule. And so what the quotient rule says is low d high minus, I'm going to try to fit this in on the screen, minus high, which is f of x, multiplied by d low, which is g prime of x, all over low squared. So that's going to be g of x quantity squared. Okay, the next step would be plugging 5 into all of these x's. Okay, I think you guys can probably do that on your own, and so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and skip to calculating the values by plugging in from the table. So h prime of 5 is going to equal, the first thing is going to be f of 5. So f of 5, if I look at the table, is 3. Multiplied by g prime of 5, and g prime of 5 is negative 2. Okay, getting those numbers from the table. Plus g of 5. G of 5, I'm sorry, I made a mistake here, didn't I? So let's back up. G prime of 5 is 5, not negative 2. So 3 times 5 plus g of 5, which is negative 2. Sorry about that. And f prime of 5 is 4. Okay, so there's the first part. And now I'm going to go ahead and plug into the second part of this. So again, g of 5 is negative 2. F prime of 5 is 4. Minus f of 5, which we said earlier was 3. And then g prime of 5, which was 5, all over g of x squared, and g of 5 is negative 2. And then make sure that you square it. Okay, so if we do the arithmetic here, and yes, you need to be able to do this without your calculator, this is going to be 15 minus 8 plus negative 8 minus 15 all over 4. And so what we end up getting here is the following. We have 15 minus 8, which is 7, and then basically minus 23 over 4. 7, of course, is 28 over 4, minus 23 over 4, and so our final answer is 5/4. Okay, so yes, you need to be able to do a little bit of arithmetic on your own without a calculator, so it's good for you to practice those things now. You should be doing most of these assignments, all but one of them really, without the use of your calculator. Okay, so example A is done. We're going to move on to example B. It says if h of x is now a different function, f of g of 2x. Okay, so please make sure that you recognize this right here is not a product. That is a composite function, which means we're going to be using the chain rule. So h prime of x is equal to the derivative of the outside, which is just f prime. Rewrite the inside exactly the way that you see it, which would be g of 2x multiplied by the derivative of g of 2x, which is going to be g prime of 2x. And then I have to remember to take the derivative of the inside of that function, and the derivative of 2x is 2. Okay, so if I go ahead and plug in 2 here, since it's asking me to find h prime of 2, then that's going to say what? I'm going to move the 2 to the front to make that a little easier, and then this is going to be f prime of g of 2 times 2 is 4. Okay, so I'm just kind of skipping a step there, making this x a 2, and 2 times 2 is 4, times g prime of 4. Okay, so if I go to the table to find these values, this is going to be 2 times f prime of g of 4, and it says that g of 4 is 3, multiplied by g prime of 4, and so that's going to be 2. F prime of 3, if I look up at the table, is -5, and g prime of 4 is 9, and if you multiply all of that together, then you should be getting -90. Okay, so there is example B. Last example for this video, so this is going to be a little tough. We might have to do some scrolling back and forth between the table and the problem, but it's okay, we'll survive. Okay, so we have h of x is equal to g of x quantity squared. So again, very similar to example B, this is a chain rule problem because I have a function g of x inside of another function which is a square. Okay, so if I take the derivative of this h of x, then h prime of x is going to equal to 2. Rewrite the parentheses, or in this case the brackets, and that would be to the first power, so I'm not going to write anything there. And then don't forget to multiply by the derivative of the inside, which is g prime of x. Okay, so h prime of 3, I'm going to substitute in 3's, so 2 times g of 3 times g prime of 3, and if I go back up to the table, g of 3 and g prime of 3 are what I need, so g of 3 is 6, and g prime of 3 is 2, and so 2 times 6, and I already forgot what it was, so I have to go back, sorry about that, is 2, and so 2 times 6 times 2 is 24. Okay, so hopefully you guys have enough information now to tackle the assignment, and if you have any questions, then please let me know.